Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about my adventures with Superman, Season 1. When I first heard about the show, it seemed like a cool Superman show. I liked all the designs. But what really caught me about it was not just the cool animation style by Studio Mirror, but how much it got the kind of pure innocence and honesty and fun about Superman, which I think is why we all sort of love the character in the first place. And it seemed like the best version of Superman I had seen in a long time. I've always really liked animated Superman stuff. I watched animated series sort of came out. I was like too much of a edgy teen for that, unfortunately. I don't know the Justice League stuff. I did grow up with the Ruby Spears Superman, which I would like to revisit. I don't know. I remember liking it. I don't remember much other than that. I do really like the Fleischer Superman and the Famous Studios Superman as well. And I play those for my daughter a lot. And this is a show I could watch with her and get her to like Superman as much as she liked those Fleischer Brothers ones. Maybe we should watch animated series. Watching them with her, I grew up watching animated comic book shows with my dad during the 90s, so it was kind of a nice full circle kind of thing that we got to do together, and she got really into it. It was kind of nice remembering why I like Superman again as a kid, why I like superhero stuff in animation, and what I like even about Superman as an animated character, particularly with the Fleischer Brothers stuff, which I learned. I did a short on the first couple episodes, and I mentioned how I thought it was influenced by Fleischer Superman. Apparently everyone told me it was when he was fighting robots, and I like that. But I also like, I think, so the whole idea of this is Jimmy Olsen, Clark Kent, who are friends, who are roommates, are starting at the Daily Planet as interns with Lois Lane, who's been an intern for a while. And they're kind of, I guess, supposed to be Gen Z or whatever it is, whatever generation marker we're using for people, are, go-getting and really into stories and really going after things. And they're trying to figure out the deal with Superman, and Clark doesn't want them to know he's Superman. Eventually they find out he's Superman, and all the kind of craziness and stuff with that. And I think this works in a lot of ways because Superman is a universal character, and I think as much as we go, oh, well, he's wearing the underwear because of strongmen from the 30s and stuff, or he's doing this because this was popular at the time and this and that, basically, like, all kids like guy is strong and flies good, and like you just sort of change that a bit every 20 years, and he's like, there's not a little kid who's like, I don't like strong guy who flies good. Like, it's just, everybody's gonna like that. I'm sorry. It's not, as crazy as other things that are more time specific. I think he kind of is beyond that. He's one of the big three of DC, and I think they all sort of, those three, at the very least, have that within them. Even if at the time nobody thought that would happen, that is what has happened and probably will happen for a while. They're sort of America's myths, and them, and probably Spider-Man as well. And this is able to do the thing with them as journalists, because even in the radio shows or the Fleischer Supermans, it's like Lois is getting her nose into stuff and Clark is helping her and stuff like that. But I think that idea of a journalist doing that feels odd. It's like, oh, you have a desk job, you have to be responsible for your job and stuff like that. They would be older, they would be millennials, and that doesn't feel quite right with this. I think what's interesting about this is they're like, who would be investigating stuff and really going about and trying to like launch themselves into these things like Lois always used to do in the older stuff, and it would be young interns trying to prove themselves. Like, that would be a more interesting way. That way, if they are more relaxed, the characters that well, and you understand why they are that way. Same with like Lois behaving like she does. I found it odd when people were, the problem with Superman is he's such a larger character than the actual stories, and a lot of people wear those shirts and to read the comics and sort of watch the movies, so you have to, I guess, respect their opinions. So that's a thing, I guess. But I guess we can entertain that. That's really great. I love that people always get to do that forever with comic books, that they used to make fun of me for reading. But yeah, like Lois Lane, I know there's like actual criticism of her like falling off the building, even though she's done that in the Christopher Reeves thing, in the comic book, probably in a couple animated things that I didn't even watch. Like, she's done it a million times forever and stuff like that. or even, you know, that they made Jimmy Olsen black. And I didn't actually notice Lois Lane was, I believe, Korean, although this is done by a South Korean animation studio. I'm not trying to be like I'm like beyond race or something. It didn't really, I don't think it came up. Maybe it was like a passing reference and I missed it, which is like wholly possible. They also get into that there's multiple different versions of these characters, and if there's multiverse, then like of course there'd be different race of these characters and so forth. But one of the things they bring it to now is having like the villains be more tech based. When they have the Amazotech CEO Anthony Izzo, I believe, those things felt like more modern, like how our villains feel more like Superman, for better or for worse. Like, you know, you have people like Lex Luthor becomes Donald Trump, and then you had Lex Luthor become Jesse Eisenberg, sort of trying to be a millennial, I guess, Mark Zuckerberg Lex Luthor, which seemed like that could be cool, but really was horrible. In this, it's like, of course, like his villains would be tech and would have, you know, that would be Superman's thing. And it kind of became this interesting idea, because instead of Superman dealing with people who are stealing jewels and using radio signals to control robots and, like, you know, having to deal with like Hawkmen in a cave or something like that, it makes more sense where he's dealing with weird Mr. Mixoplexus. I forget how you say his name. I don't know how you say his name. Can you not say his name or something? I don't know. And dealing with tech stuff that feels like super out of control. That feels makes a little more sense nowadays, and I think is a little more relatable to it. And it's like, of course, like that's what young people who are trying to get a name in this world are having to fight against, these like mega corporations, and trying to get like even a foothold in, even though all feels impossible dealing with all these things. There's like a larger world that feels like it's coming up against them. And even like there are certain things with when Lois finds out it's Superman and they're dating that I thought was kind of an interesting idea. The idea that she gets this ball, I guess it's sort of getting into spoilers, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess it is. She has this ball that shows her like all the Clarks, Supermans that went bad, and I didn't think that was too far, because there's a lot of times, and I don't know if it gets discussed or you discussed it with friends or something, where someone's dating someone and they find out like, oh, they were in this like horrible fight, or like their friends are always in fights, or like, you know, they're this large person, they fear for, or the woman fears for her safety or something. And that's something drama doesn't like to explore as much, because it is rather dark and sad, but it's not for everyone in every situation. But I think, you know, when someone brings a valid concern, or that's how it played for me, because I've known people who've said that, like, well, I saw this guy do this thing, but I'm really into him, and he doesn't act like that now, but like, how long until something bad happens? And it's like that's a real threat a lot of people live with, man. It's not a silly thing, and I thought they incorporated that really well. I really like the voice cast of Jack Quaid, who plays Superman, who's the kid of Meg Ryan and Dennis Quaid. Didn't know that. That was kind of interesting. I don't know the woman who does Lois Lane, Alice Lee, but she did a really great job, actually. I thought she was really wonderful. She was one of my favorite voices in it. It's also like, I think with Jack Quaid doing Superman and doing it correctly, like, it's a hard thing. There's a reason why Christopher Reeve is so revered as much as he is, and I think he's able to do the kind of like newer, honest, kind of quirky, dorky Clark how he should be nowadays. I thought the performance played off that well, as well as Alice Lee was very good at being like kind of eccentric, manic, like obsessed with Lois as much as she was. Jimmy Olsen was a complete surprise to me. He was voiced by Ishmael Shadid. I think the performance was fine. It was a good performance, but I don't know. This guy is, I guess to most of you, he was on jury duty as one of the jurors, and he's older. He's older than Jimmy Olsen, the character, and he's also on the show my daughter watches, That Girl Lele, as the guy who owns the Boombox Burger. So if you know what That Girl Lele is, comment below. I'd be curious. I don't think anyone really does who watches me, but I think a show that could be summed up, like, I know there's been Adventures with Superman before with George Reeves, and there's been other versions of this, and I almost thought when it said My Adventures with Superman be like from the perspective of Lois seeing these adventures or something like that, but it isn't. I think it's just called that for whatever reason. is that like this reminds me why I like Superman and why I want to show Superman to my kids, even though I'm not the biggest DC person at all. It also shows a good arc. This reminded me a bit of the recent MCU Spider-Mans, where it's like, let's not do the origin story in one movie. Let's do it over the 3 movies. You know, you don't get the great power with great responsibility thing till the, you know, you get to No Way Home. And like, then you get the whole arc of that character through that. And like with this, with Superman, like he gets a random power in episode and he has to learn how to use it. And that works really well with TV. In fact, I think this idea works better for TV than movies, because after a while you're like, what are they doing with this thing? That's weird. And in the show, you're like, oh, he learns super hearing. He has to learn how to deal with the super hearing. It feels like a lot like being an adult. Like you have a new responsibility. You have to understand how to deal with that responsibility. I mean, you know, most people don't have like laser eyes and stuff, but he has to learn how to deal with his laser eyes. He has to learn how to harness it so he doesn't like kill people, he doesn't burn himself out. And it's interesting how this, you know, I know we have so much talk about mental health now, but this, like with his super hearing, he has to learn about mental health, about not having burnout, things like that. Like this feels very natural for the Superman we should have right now. I almost think this is like so good. James Gunn's making a Superman, and I don't know, it would be hard to follow this up in my mind. Like, to me, this is my current Superman. But I think it's best summed up with this one is just, this shows me why I like this character, why I love this character, why I like him animated. It has all of that in it. As well as, like, even how they do Krypton. Like, he doesn't understand Kryptonians, so it's like the mysteries keep going, but it feels natural. It's like, yeah, why the fuck would he know Kryptonian? It feels like someone who's adopted from a foreign place and someone speaks that language and they don't know it, which is actually pretty normal. There's tons of people who don't know, you know, are Latino but don't know Spanish, or are from, you know, China and don't know Chinese, and or don't know, you know, are adopted from somewhere and don't know the language. And I think that's kind of an interesting idea, especially like they pick like a kind of Nordic Russian, I don't know, I'm not a language expert, but it was interesting. That I thought that was actually really cool. Like, he doesn't fully understand everything, he's sort of trying to figure it out, like we all are, honestly, throughout life. So I thought that was like a really cool way to interpret that. And I don't know, I think it's hard to talk about the show without just sort of yammering about it, because I've seen the better reviews of this. You're just like, and I like this thing, and this thing is cool, and this is great, and like I thought this interpretation of this is great. And like I even think the storytelling works in almost a kind of like, almost like how Grey's Anatomy in its first couple seasons, where you'd want to watch the next one, and then eventually that went on too long, but the like you'd be hooked right at the end. And it was like even the last one, where you find out who the general is, when they find out, when Lois figures out who Superman is, like when she does a crazy thing, it, like my daughter would be super into it, and like would be like, oh my god, that can't happen, or like how they're gonna go on their first date, but then this happened. It's like I was so invested in them. And I think it is like, this is the show that makes you go, I really love Superman, I love this character so much. And I don't think there's enough superhero media that makes you have an outpouring of support like, this is why I like this character. I don't think the superhero media thing is as over as, I think it's just a little overexposed currently, and there hasn't been as much triumphantly great ones other than Spider-Verse. I think this, other than Spider-Verse, is probably one of the best superhero pieces of media I've seen this year, because it really wants you to get into this character. Like it's like infectious. Like you can't just like, there's a reason like I wanted to watch this with my kids. Like I wanted to show people. It feels like the beginning of when this stuff happened, because you wanted to show your fellow friends. And I think like having that energy actually in the media itself like makes it even more infectious. Like I had to see how it ends. I wanted to make this video to talk about it. I wanted to tell people about this show, even if, you know, they're like, I don't watch that stuff. I'm like, cool, that's too bad you don't like good things. But like this is just like triumphant, and I like the theme song. This feels like it's from the 90s. I like the animation style, feels very anime inspired. I don't understand how something's anime or not anime or whatever, but it's definitely anime influence, and it just has such a fun love to it. It seems like they like love presenting this with it. I think though the thing with the show going forward is there's a lot of shows that have a great first season and you're totally in love with it and it's infectious, and it's hard to evolve that throughout the arc of a whole show. And I'm not trying to be like, you know, hating on it before it comes out, but I think that is going to be the challenge come season 2, is like, what more are you going to do with this? How are you going to flesh out these ideas more? But do it in a way that makes you really love what's going on with these characters and keep that energy level up. And I think that will be pretty hard. I hope they're up for it, but I'm excited to see them do it in the future. If you love Superman or even like Superman, I think this is definitely a thing to check out. I don't know if that movie or whatever the next thing will be able to follow this up effectively, but if not, then good luck to them. I wouldn't mind having 2 good Superman things. That's pretty cool if it is, but I think it shows you like what works so well about this character in animation and what can continue to work well with this character in animation. This feels like very modern anime kind of style, maybe not as crazy and expressive as that could possibly be, but I think in such a way that like made me keep wanting to watch it more. And in a sense, like I originally watched it for the animation style to see how they're going to do this, but in the end of it, I watched it because I love these characters. I wanted to see what happens. Like I wanted to see, like, is Clark going to figure out what's going on with these villains with Zero Day, like what's going to happen with Krypton, what's going to happen with Jimmy and Lois, like Jimmy saw that big gorilla thing, what's going on there. Like it grabs you. Once it gets you, like you want to keep watching. And most people I know, even if they didn't watch all of them, they watched a lot of it because they got into it. And I think that's like, it's an interesting thing for an animated Superman show. I have no clue why this was on Adult Swim. It should have been a regular Cartoon Network. It is very much an all audience show and very, very good at it. And but I think in the end, it just showed me why I like this character, why I like this kind of real honest, all American kind of superhero kind of character, but kind of shows you the positivity of being sort of that honest kind of good person in the end, and how hard that is to weigh on your shoulders, almost in the way we all look at Spider-Man, but inside of a natural way that can only be interpreted with the adventures of Superman. So if you've seen My Adventures with Superman Season 1 and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.